I guess I'm going to start today. Presentation. So just a little bit of background on this Shoah Foundation. Oh, can you hear me? Okay. Let's see. Forgive me. There we go. All right, there we go. At the Shoah Foundation, at the core of our work really is an archive of 55,000 video testimonies, a few audio testimonies as well. Yes. And these testimonies really are full life stories. They cover the periods before the genocides, during the genocide, and then after the genocide. And we recorded testimonies in 65 countries and in 43 languages. It's a large archive that we are trying to use for educational purposes. And you can see our mission statement here is to develop empathy, understanding, and respect through testimony. And we have two primary focuses, really. One is the K through 12 age range for our educational programs, where we use the testimonies for promoting ethical understanding, character education, that sort of thing. We also have a Center for Advanced Genocide Research, which is involved in the academic aspects of the archive in terms of promoting research and scholarship in the archive. And recently we've been moving into immersive technologies as a means to engage, I guess, more deeply with some audiences, particularly younger audiences. A few of the projects that we are working on include the Dimensions in Testimony, Last Goodbye, Lala, which is an eyewitness application, 360, and 360-degree video testimony, and I'll talk a little bit about each of these in a minute. But really our purpose was to use these new technologies, integrate them with testimonies where the survivors are telling their stories in their own words, and to make an impact on the viewer, essentially. The technologies we're using do include virtual reality, some AI, and that sort of thing. So a few of these projects actually require wearing the virtual reality goggles. But let me just talk about the Dimensions in Testimony project first by showing you an example. So Dimensions in Testimony, really, before I pull up the video, is they're interactive biographies with survivors. So we've filmed each of the survivors with 360-degree cameras, essentially. Right now, we're only using 2 dimensions of the video that's available. Our plan is to eventually use holographic display kind of technology to show a 3D rendering of the interviewee in whatever space that is available. Right now we've been doing pilots with museums, and we actually have the Dimensions in Testimony in I think 7 museums right now. Some of the museums include the Dallas Holocaust Museum, the Illinois Holocaust Museum, the Los Angeles Museum of the Holocaust, and a number of others, including the Fisher Museum, which is at USC. Now, Those installations are theater-like, basically, so it's an enclosed room where it's been designed to kind of use the walls for displaying images, photographs of pre-war life, basically. So when they start the program, basically the walls are showing like a home inside of a home, like a living room, for instance, and shows some of the artifacts of the interviewees that were important to them. So you get a sense of their life inside the home, and we talk about that life a little bit prior to showing the interviewee on stage. So right now we're using a technique called Pepper's Ghost, which is really a 2D rendering. We project the interviewee's image on a slanted glass pane, basically, and it gives you the impression that the interviewee is sitting on the stage. So it's really about interacting with the interviewees, having conversations with the interviewees. It kind of developed out of the tradition where many of the interviewees would go to school classrooms, for instance. They would talk about their experiences during the Holocaust, give them an overview of their experiences, and then they would open up for questions at the end with the students, so the students could ask them any questions that came to mind. So it's the same idea of continuing that tradition where the audience is able to interact and ask questions of the interviewee. So the video originally was filmed in a 3D environment with green screen. So the interviewee would sit in the middle of the floor, basically, with green screen all around, and a number of cameras. Initially, the first ones were filmed with like 60 cameras surrounding them. And that's used to render the image that you'll see here. Pull this up, and hopefully the sound will give me a moment. The volume is maxed out. I'm not sure you'll be able to hear the interview either. So someone asked him a question, and then he responds.
I did not to say goodbye to my family because I was with my father when we were undressing, then he was running in front of me, and then he disappeared. And of course, my mother and my sister went a different column, women and children. And 2 or 3 days later, one of the people who I knew from, people from Warsaw, I kept on asking, I actually kept on asking about my mother and my sister, because by that time, I had realized that there was a selection and some people were living, and some people had actually found their wives and they were talking about it. So I started, I realized that there's a possibility.
So that gives you some sense of the experience for the, excuse me, for the audience. If I can stop it here. And let me just show you, there's also a 2-dimensional version, or using a large monitor essentially, in a couple of the museums as well. So people can go up to the interviewee monitors and ask them questions with the microphones that are provided. Let me go back and just quickly, I know I'm probably running out of time already, but The Last Goodbye is another project that we developed in 2017 and 2018. That is really a on-site interview. Pardon me, my sinuses are a little bad. Where we filmed the person on site at visiting one of the concentration camps that he was in during the war, Majdanek in particular, And it's a VR film essentially that is about 18 minutes long, and you put on goggles essentially, and you go along with the survivor as he goes through the Maidana camp, concentration camp. He visits things like the railroad car there, the barracks that were there, and other places in the camp. And I do have a clip of that. I'll show you real quick. Just to give you a sense again. So this is just a 2D rendering.
When we were
of course.
pushed into those wagons to take us to the east, we didn't know where we were going. All I remember, screaming, the crying of children, and people were dying from suffocating.
And it's a full room scale projection, so you can actually walk around a little bit with the VR goggles on.
My father
so you can move
found a
around within
space
the
for
rooms
us
with him.
that we were reasonably safe. And he kind of almost like surrounded us with his hands. I always imagined that these were wings of an angel because he kept us together. My mother, my twin sister, and I, we were like one, and I don't remember how long we drove.
All right, that gives you an idea of that experience. So we have done a number of different surveys of audiences at the museums, as well as some pilot sessions with students. And generally the evaluations have been that the technologies like this do have a greater impact on the educational development of the students, and also empathy and things like that. And I had a couple of more to show you, but I think we're 2 minutes still. Okay, good. Let me show you another one, which is from Lala, our Eyewitness 360 program. Now this is in our Eyewitness application, which is a free application available to teachers and students in the high school and middle school age ranges. So this is an exhibit on that webpage application, and you can actually click on the video if you have goggles on, and you can play them with, I believe it's 5 goggles. But just Lala is part animation and part real life filming of the interviewee talking. So there's 3D animation of him being separated basically from his dog in one of the camps that he was in during the war. And it's a very emotional clip. But I just wanted to introduce you to that also. And then one of the last things that we've been doing is filming interviewees, again with 360 cameras, on site at a number of the different concentration camps. This was in partnership with the International March of the Living, which over the years has brought survivors to the camps to honor the memory of the people who were killed in the camps. And because the survivors are getting so aged now, there's fewer and fewer who can attend these. So the idea is that we film these interviewees inside the environments that they were at during the war, so that we can capture that experience and preserve it for future generations. And that's it.
Great looking. Can't wait to actually check out some of those things with the live. I'm going to do this because I'm a pacer. All right. Hello. I'm Dan Hawkins. I'm the Academic Technology Librarian at the Citadel. As you can see, I'm in a uniform there because in a sentence that would have seemed absolutely absurd to be 2 years ago, I am a captain in the South Carolina Unformed Militia, as are all faculty at the Citadel, just so we show buy-in to the military side of the college and everything. I did shave a beard that I've had since the Clinton administration for this job. It was late 97, 97, early 98 that I last went barefaced, but I could technically get away with a mustache, but this picture proved to be, to my taste at least, that I can't pull that look off. So as the academic technology librarian, my main job is overseeing the library's Makerspace. And we have a variety of tools in there. We have 3D printing, some small 3D scanner, a VR headset, which I'm going to talk about in more detail in a moment, Arduino kits that they can check out so they can learn some electronics and programming, CNC milling, which I'll show you one little thing about that because I'm excited about it. Some CAD programs that aren't available on all of the computers on campus, and some other things as well. So I'm excited about that, but I'll give you a little bit of my ideology behind why I think my makerspaces are good and why they're good in libraries. So the best expression of why makerspaces fit are an important thing I've heard is from this shop class of Soulcraft by Matthew Crawford. Good book. It says, in schools we create artificial learning environments for our children that they know to be contrived and undeserving of their full attention and engagement. Without the opportunity to learn through the hands, the world remains abstract and distant, and the passions for learning will not be engaged. Now that's a strong statement and a little bit of an overstatement, but I think that when you can provide things like 3D printing or VR or these things to students, you're giving them an opportunity to learn in a way that they don't normally do so. And I think that's really exciting. I think that is very mission-centric to why we would do it in a library, because you think, I got this from Colin here, our old boss and mentor, Adam Rogers, always said this in 2 words, which I think are apt. Access and literacy. Like that is what libraries are about. We're providing information to students, and we're also training them how to think about information, how to find information through the library, and then we're also, so there's both components. It's access and it's teaching, and I think that applies equally to technology. And a library is a perfect place to do that because we are providing access to the disciplines that might not have it. You might have 3D printers in the engineering department. You might not have them elsewhere. So I'm very excited about having a central place, and it's really starting to take hold at the Citadel. I've worked with a German professor on a Bauhaus project where her students designed something in CAD in the style of Bauhaus. So not only are they learning about Bauhaus, they're engaging in the process of trying to design something to varying degrees of success in the style of Bauhaus. I'm co-teaching a class with a business professor, and I'm showing them the things in the makerspace, and they're learning from that. The Innovation Center and both the business school and the science school are going to be drawing from us. Instead of pulling together and creating their own makerspaces, they're going to be using our resources, which I think is a really exciting way to do it. Now, there's a little bit of argument over who gets to use the word innovation in their title, so I'm not exactly sure where that stands right now, but they're both there. So I'm just very passionate about this because I learned these things in the library. Colin over there left for grad school, and our boss said, who should do the makerspace? I said, well, if you train me, I'll do it, and then they let me do it, so it was great. So VR specifically, when I came to the Citadel a year and a half ago, I had the experience at a much larger school at State, and they had a whole room that was just a VR studio, right? And they had, 9 or 10 stations in there, Colin, is that right? And they had Oculus, they had HTC Vive, and they had the PlayStation as well. And this was the one I was the most comfortable with. So when I pushed for us to get a VR rig at the Citadel, this is the one we chose. And the way it works is you have the headset that plugs into the computer, obviously, and then you have your controllers, and you have these base stations that put out overlapping fields that can measure where you are in there. So that's how it works. It all runs through, we run most of the stuff through Steam. If you're not familiar with Steam, it's basically Netflix or Prime Video for video games, where you can turn your computer essentially into a gaming console. And so how to implement that into actual use at the Citadel was the next question. I like it stayed, and then I saw a presentation yesterday at University of Oklahoma. Got it right this time. There's a scale of that you can have with a school of about 30,000 people that you can't at a scale of 3,000. So, like, how to start implementing this on a smaller scale. So the first thing I did was I just had some events. So the past couple Halloweens we did a haunted house with an app that we just got off of Steam, where they go through and it's all atmosphere and jump scares. The loudest I've ever heard anybody swear in my life was when the little creepy demon girl came at him, and he dropped the F-bomb so hard that some of the technical services people came out to see what was the matter, and it was great. It was not great because somebody's yelling profanity in the library, but it was also kind of great. And then we've also done a couple other ones, including a VR skiing study break during winter break. And this is a good way just to get the kids interested in it. Like, you have these events to have them there. But that's still not quite enough for me, because you wanted them to be able to actually use the stuff on their own. So the next step was this summer, I started teaching orientations on safety, how to use the thing. They sign a waiver saying, we won't sue you if we trip. And then how to reserve the space. And once they've gone through this and signed the waiver, they're allowed to actually reserve the space. And this is also very good. I think this in itself would be a valuable thing for a library to do, in the sense that you're actually giving people access to a technology they may, especially like with a lot of students we might have at the Citadel, they've not had access to VR before, so it's a great opportunity to do that. But still, I want to actually engage this sort of in the educational process, right? So I want to take this from being just something that we do events and something that they can come in and use just as a technology. So when the opportunity came to teach a class this semester, first time I've ever taught a class, so I'm a little nervous. I already see things I'm going to do differently next semester, but it's Fine Arts 350, Art in the Makerspace. So what I've done is I've built a course just around the different things that we have in the Makerspace, and some of them are sort of in a pipeline that's going towards a VR project. This first one I'm going to show you is just because I'm excited about it. We're doing a CNC milling project where they can either use wood blocks and etch one of their own designs or whatever. I sort of recreated the character Bone from Bone by Jeff Smith. If you've read that, it's really great. But and then also they can make a wood cut like that, where we put ink on it and make wood cuts, or they can use a PCB board like you would use for making a circuit board to solder things onto. And I thought that comes out. So now, actually, while I'm doing this, one of my colleagues is watching my class as they work on the design, and we're going to actually start milling this next week. But that's sort of an outlier. The rest of it is more of sort of a pipeline that's going towards a VR project. So at the beginning, I teach them how to use Tinkercad, which is a very easy CAD program. It just uses simple shapes to build more complex shapes, and they can make the things. So throughout the course of the semester, I showed this in the first class. So as the semester goes along, they practice with it, and they can get better at it as they go. And they're going to have objects that they can use at the end. The business school has some really high-end 3D scanners that we don't actually have in the library, so I've been lucky enough to be able to use those. You can see us here scanning our university president, General Walters, and the 3D printing. So I do a 3D printing thing as well, because I think that's also an essential skill for people to know. But here they have an object that they can print using this. They usually don't do people because it's very difficult to scan. It's more difficult to scan people than it is to scan objects. But after this, they have an object that they can print, or they have an object that they can use in the digital format. So again, you can kind of see where this is going. And then we're wrapping up a photogrammetry project as well. This is the process of using a series of still images from different angles to stitch together a 3D model. And this is a statue from my old school, but they do this. So now, at this point of the semester, they have the stuff that they've made in Tinkercad, the stuff that they've scanned, the stuff that they've gotten through photogrammetry, and then week after next, after we've done the milling project, we're going to put them in, where I'm going to show them some very basic Unity skills. So they're going to create create a space, either a garden or a room or a building where they're going to display the things that they've made over the course of the semester. And so this is really an experiment that's still out. The results are not in, so I'm really excited to see how this actually comes in. I already see for my part how I'm going to do it. But to get the kids interested in the VR and get them more comfortable with it, this after I did the Tinkercad on the first session, the second session, I introduced them to a app you may be familiar with it called Tilt Brush, where you can do 3D paintings. And so I just wanted to kind of show a few examples of what my students came up with. Ethan Warner came up with a silo that he had built and I have gifts of these, like he had built a deer stand on the side of a silo at the farm that his family has. So he recreated that in VDR, which I thought was really interesting. Trey Stevens went a little more out there, but there's a fox overlooking a bed, and there's a house, and I was really impressed with the amount of effort he put into this. Judy Chu came up with this garden that she did, and I was really pleased with that as well. And then last, one of our students, Chad Strunk, came up with what we call the final stand, or the last stand, I can't remember which, but you see a guy on a thing. So I'm just really excited, just the idea of not only giving access to the kids, but also just kind of showing them how to use this stuff. And so I've been trying to get different ways to do this, and I'm starting to get purchased on the campus with different departments, and the library is just a great place for this sort of thing to happen. And so just through having it available and through the first steps are these classes that I'm teaching and co-teaching. So I'm just really excited about the opportunity to tell you guys about this. Like I said, it's a very exciting thing. And like I said, it's on a smaller scale. Like we have a small student body, and I've been fortunate to be able to get the stuff that we have had in here. But anyway, so I have a question slide, but I think we'll save that until Joey's done first. Thank you.
Both my waters just in case. While I'm loading this up, you guys, I have a quick question. I always like to know, like, how many of y'all have Makerspaces and already? And how many of you have VR? Okay, cool. So I'm assuming some of you are just here to get ideas and some of you are here to learn more. It's kind of the split. I always kind of like to get a sense of where everyone's at. So how many of you guys have like just one VR set or a couple? And then others of you actually have studios? That's cool. Okay. I'm gonna need my glasses, you guys. I'm sorry, I'm gonna look like a librarian now. So, oh, that was not me. I'm a Mac user, so I apologize. I'm like in a whole foreign country here. So just bear with me. Thank you. All right, can everyone hear me? Yes. Cool. So I'm Joey, as we talked about, and I want to kind of say, just in case, does everyone know what augmented and virtual, like what the differences are between augmented and virtual reality? Because if anyone, okay, because not everyone does. It's been around a long time. It kind of started with, AR is like QR codes, right? The phone technology finally caught up, everyone's got one, and then QR codes, even though they've been around for a really long time, finally became usable. So augmented reality is really like an overlay, and you would view it like through your phone. That's the most common, right? It's an overlay of digital content over like the real world. Whereas, and I'm not going to show this video, but our slides will be up so you can come back. This is a really kind of a good video of how to explain. And virtual reality is more of like an immersive experience that really includes a host of technologies that include things like 360 video, which Doug kind of talked about earlier, And 3D printing, makerspaces. So you can't really do VR. I hate this. If I'm loud enough and I don't need that, let me know. Got it? Okay. Darn. All right, cool. Way better. Okay. So that's kind of the interrelated thing of when people try to explain augmented and virtual reality. And I've had this like problem since I've been doing this since 2012, 2013. I can tell you that the first time I tried to show augmented reality using PowerPoint, it was an utter failure because people couldn't get it, right? It was too early. So, and it's the same thing with virtual reality. Unless you've actually had a headset on and played with it, you really don't get it. And it's every institution's at different places, so depending on how much funding you have or what, different things. So I'm coming from the perspective of institution that we don't have a makerspace in play. This has been my own personal revolution that I've just been stomping at, trying to get this into, our institution. Matt Branton's here. He's been instrumental in helping us. And so this is just for fun. Talking about 360 video. You can use Google Lens to get 360 AR in, look at a hedgehog or a tiger. So if you want to use your phone, you can just Google it. It's interesting and fun. But my point is, great, the stuff's all good and fun and we need to teach it, but how do you actually implement it into the curriculum in a meaningful way, right? Because it's a gadget, it's expensive, right? The budgets are, it cycles out, you've got to replace it, right? So to me, I also teach sculpture, so I started with my sculpture students years ago and had them work with augmented reality. And with virtual reality, it's a little harder sell if you don't have a big budget. How do you, make a meaningful exploration into virtual reality in a library, right? That's going to be cost effective. And so for us, what we did was we kind of kept working at this idea of trying to get a makerspace and stuff, but we actually went ahead and I'm just like showing you all the different things we've been talking about, Arduino, like you were saying, Internet of Things, people don't think of that, and 3D printing. But here's another augmented reality app, the IKEA app. Has anyone played with that? Cool. So what we did was we actually bought a grouping of 20 headsets, that Lenovo headsets, and here we go. And we are implementing them now. I'm trying to watch time, and so I apologize, you guys. As they're sort of piloting them right now, I'm on sabbatical, so I wasn't there when we got them, so Matt's been helping us with that. But basically trying to figure out how do you really use these in a library setting. So what we've done is we're working with our first year experience to do one-shots with our Lenovo headsets, which is what we decided to go with because they're kind of standalone and they have carts. We also kind of worked with faculty one-on-one on kind of boutique projects this semester just to kind of get started and see what works and what doesn't work. And then next semester, I'll be teaching a 3-credit-hour library course in virtual reality for students that's going to be connected to basically all the different visual cultural references that VR kind of encompasses. All of these narratives that we're making and all of these things, it's just another media. So you can take it back, to the key texts and the key ideas of the gaze or, the myth of photographic truth. I mean, to bring these ideas and concepts back to, that liberal arts education and not just have it be this little apple, right? But where does it fit in? Because we all know that the making part is important, but how does it fit in libraries in an intellectual way? That's my question, in a meaningful intellectual way. And then how do we also start finding what kind of library content? That's a big question for me, is where are the libraries going to come in, with virtual reality in the sense of the vendors? We've got ProQuest and Alexander Street that are starting to do 360 videos. You've got the New York Times. But where's the rest of the content going to come from, right? Because it's ephemeral. The New York Times app is no longer, they don't do it anymore. Did y'all know that? Yeah, so one of the best things in the world that you could use to market your subscription to the New York Times, right? They just took it away. So how is this, where's the content going to come from, and how are we going to integrate that? So that's my personal kind of what I'm bringing to this panel, is just a different kind of way to look at what it is. So, we know that libraries can start off easy with Google, Glasses and Cardboard. There's a lot of different types of headsets for VR, so picking one is hard. That you all have their challenges. Excuse me. Have you guys heard of the Merge Cube? That's an interesting one because there's an SDK that you can use to actually put things, have people program things onto the cube. However, trying to pay for that subscription is a nightmare because they're not in the US. So, but it's a really cool platform. And these are the Lenovo's. So I'm kind of rushing and I apologize. That's basically the gist of what I'm pointing out here. And is it, aside from the Makerspace and the budgets and these really cool projects, but I love your project, but my college will never be able to do your project. It's just, unless we write a heck of a grant. So I'm just trying to show that other perspective of, when you're trying to get administrators on board or get budgets or get money, how do you get them on board? And this is Matt, you should recognize this. This was one of our first testings. Was this the FYE, first year experience? So this is cool. You can see here we've got them in the room, and they actually are, got the headsets on.
That was a digital arts class, actually.
Was it? Thank you. So this is to kind of give you some perspective, like how many people. This is cool. You walk in the library and there's a bunch of kids with headsets on, and people can see okay, they're doing something realistic. They're either using, some kind of app, but the mechanics of, and Matt can speak to this since you're in the room, but the organization of 20 headsets that are in rotation with a limited staff is obviously, and budget is, can be perplexing. So it's all these things to think about with VR, because everyone's like, oh, VR, but what really will one headset do? You need to figure out how to integrate it into your long range plans for your institution and your library. And then the Oculus Quest is another headset that we looked at, but it's more of a gaming headset. And I'm not going to show this, but this is one of my art students who did an entire basically performance piece using tilt brush. And was very interesting. So we are on a number of time. I'm sorry, you guys. So if anyone has any questions, and I'm sorry that was kind of rushed as a, but it's a different perspective to consider. Maybe when you're thinking about either what you're going to do with the VR stuff you have, because those of you that have centers and hopefully budgets can replace that equipment, but those of you who have smaller, things, how are you going to get that funding? So, thank you for coming.
There's nothing coming up.